Hello Raptors fans, and congrats on your favorite team moving into the top 4. This wonderful turn of events has Raptors fandom on cloud 9, making the abysmal Tampa season seem almost worth it? Well, probably not worth it, but it's definitely nice to come away from this season with a consolation prize. In any case, today we're going to be discussing the various options the Raptors have with the 4th pick, and also talking about Ben Simmons, how various members of the media are linking him to the Raptors, and the pros and cons of trading for him. Let's jump in. So, let's start with the 4th overall pick. I did a draft video a few months ago with pro scout Henry Ward, so when you're finished with this video, be sure to check that out for more background on some of the names I'll be mentioning today. We'll begin with the 3 names that could potentially make an appearance at number 4. Cade Cunningham will almost assuredly go number 1 overall. He's pegged as a generational talent with tons of skill, height, and high-level basketball processing. Detroit has apparently said that they'd be open to trading the pick, but I'm sure that that's only if somebody offered them someone like Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Jason Tatum, or another young franchise player, i.e. it's not gonna happen. This draft, prior to the Raptors landing a top 4 pick, was considered a top 4 draft, with one clearly established number 1, one generally accepted number 2, and 2 players at 3 and 4 who are rated similarly. Then the talent falls off a bit. The generally accepted number 2 is Evan Mobley. Mobley is a unicorn-type big man with excellent ball handling skills and huge two-way potential. Anthony Davis has been a comp, as has Karl Anthony Towns, both thin, center-sized guys with very high skill levels. I also have him at number 2, and if he miraculously fell to the Raptors, I would be over the moon. The next 2 prospects, who have been trading spots on draft boards for months, are Jalen Green and Jalen Suggs. Jalen Green is a very exciting shooting guard with a very high skill level. He is excellent at creating shots for himself off the dribble and has fantastic potential as a one-on-one player who can nail pull-up shots and break down defenders off the dribble. Watching highlight reels, even casual fans will figure out that this guy has big-time star potential. When I watch him, I think Zach LaVine, I think Devin Booker, I think Bradley Beal. Guys who you can hand the ball to and say, "Go get me a basket." Jalen Suggs, on the other hand, is another guy who could fall to the Raptors at this pick. Suggs is less of a one-on-one guy and more of a heady all-around player. Suggs proved that he had some big-time chops by leading his team to a near-undefeated season in college, showcasing his great decision-making, leadership, and potential as a floor general. Unlike Jalen Green, Suggs doesn't have the show-stopping skill package. His one-on-one moves don't figure to be as elite, and he doesn't have the same potential as a shooter. On the flip side, Suggs' ability to understand the game and get others involved are on a different level compared to Green. Suggs also is no slouch in the athleticism department, showing great speed with the ball in his hands, and he's proven that he can get up and finish through contact. When I look at him, I see prime Brandon Roy, I see prime Darren Williams, I see Ja Morant. Guys who can get to the basket and score, but also run your offense. The advantage that the Raptors have in this situation is that they have the opportunity to take whoever falls to them and not have to think too long and hard about it, or be faced with the what if, after the fact hand-wringing that could happen if they drafted 2nd or 3rd and the player they pass on goes on to be a superstar. While it is possible that Mobley could fall in the draft, both the Rockets and the Cavs have what they consider to be their big men of the future on the roster. I wouldn't get my hopes up. That said, he would be the ideal player to fall into our laps at number 4. Between the 2 Jalens, I think I would peg my hopes on Green falling. Green's ultra-high skill level, I believe, gives him the least bust potential. I think he's the safer pick, and that's really what the Raptors need at this point. Just a high-level player they can plug into their core. There are defensive questions, but the Raptors can afford to take their time, perhaps running him off the bench for the first season until he's ready to enter the starting lineup. On the flip side, Suggs is a fantastic fit from a culture and need perspective. The Raptors would love to have a guy that could come in day one and help the Raptors run their offense. The Raptors also love high IQ players who understand their schemes, and his height and skill set would make him a good fit next to Fred VanVleet in the backcourt. My problem with Suggs is mainly whether he will get there from a skills point of view. Will his shot develop? Will he be able to break down players off the dribble like the top guards in the league can? I'm sure he will at the very least be a decent starter, but I think that with a gun to my head, you go with the guy who has all of those big-time skills and trust that the Raptors' development process can fill in the gaps in other areas. As I said earlier, unless the Raptors make a deal to move up, they'll be picking who falls to them. That is, unless they decide to defy expectations and pick a player off the board or deal the pick. The Raptors have had quite a few moments in team history where they've defied expectations and taken someone who wasn't considered the consensus at their pick. Pascal Siakam and Bruno Caboclo spring to mind. Perhaps the Raptors could see something in draft prospect Scotty Barnes or Josh Giddey, an Australian player they've been actively scouting for a while now. I won't speculate too much on them moving up or down in the draft via a trade, but I'm certainly very excited to see what happens on July 29th. The next thing we should talk about is the media noise centered around Ben Simmons. On a recent Bill Simmons podcast, his guest Joe House suggested a trade: Kyle Lowry and a future first for Ben Simmons. On his podcast, Brian Windhorst and Ramona Shelburne opined on the best landing spot for Ben Simmons. They both agreed Toronto would be a good spot for him if he were traded. Let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. Ben Simmons just had one of the most disappointing playoff series of all time. His free throw shooting was almost unbelievably bad, allowing the Hawks to play him off the floor by fouling him off the ball and forcing him to the line, where he shot an abysmal 33%. He also only scored 3 field goals total in the fourth quarter the entire 7-game series. He was very, very bad, and Philadelphia fans are royally pissed, and understandably want him off the team. The flip side to this is that Ben Simmons was on the short list for Defensive Player of the Year this season. He's 24 years old, and outside of putting the ball into the hoop, is one of the most talented players in the league. He is a flawed player, but if he didn't just have one of the most disappointing series ever, he would not be on the market. Lowry's value is also probably much, much higher than it used to be. Chris Paul's undeniable contribution to the Suns and the spectacular flameouts by the teams courting Kyle Lowry at the deadline, and the narratives that have been spun as a result of that, will probably make GMs reevaluate how much they want him on their squad. The reason I'm mentioning Lowry is because a trade to Philadelphia has been on the cards for a while now, just with different personnel attached. The speculation being that the Raptors were asking for Tyrese Maxey and other assets. Now the shoe is on the other foot, with Maxey having an impressive showing in the Hawks series and Simmons having a dismal one. There's potential for a Kyle Lowry-Ben Simmons swap. In investment terms, Simmons is what is known as a distressed asset. His terrible series-losing performance versus the Hawks has turned him into a pariah to the notoriously tough Philadelphia fanbase. It would take a miraculous PR performance for the front office to resell the fanbase on an improved Ben Simmons. So you may be asking, why should the Raptors consider it? Ben Simmons is on a maximum contract, making $33 million next season and $40 million in 24-25. There is risk there. There's also an expression in the investment world that you should never try to catch a falling knife, which means if a stock has fallen a great deal from its original position, that doesn't mean it won't stop falling just because you've decided to buy it. Most of the time, reclamation players aren't signed to maximum contracts. There is the potential that Simmons just isn't that good. that his issues shooting the basketball are just too deadly a flaw for any team looking to compete. With all of that said, if you were looking for value on a Kyle Lowry sign-and trade, Ben Simmons would probably represent the biggest possible return. And if you're an investor, advanced statistics are kind of like looking at a company's fundamentals, and Ben's advanced stats are very good. Even with his flaws as a shooter, Ben is in the 83rd percentile on offense according to advanced stats, buoyed by his efficient inside scoring and strong playmaking skills. Defensively, Simmons is in the 96th percentile. He's an absolute unit on that end of the floor, both in terms of team defense, where he's able to switch and recover in multiple different scenarios, and also in one-on-one situations, where he is arguably the best player in the league. Maybe second to OG Anunoby. Overall, the advanced stats say that he's an elite player. The other question would be fit. How would Ben Simmons fit on the Raptors? They already have two forwards that they are committed to long-term in Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. This isn't as easy to answer, but I have some ideas. The first would be to bring back an improved version of the Raptors' small ball lineup, playing three forwards instead of a center and switching everything. These small lineups looked very feast and famine for the Raptors last season, where when they were working, they would create problems for other teams by switching ball screens, helping in recovery, and closing out on shooters. When it wasn't working, teams would force the Raptors into later and later help rotations until a player was wide open at the three-point line. With Simmons, OG, and Siakam as their front court, you would have three extremely long and athletic players who could run a very optimized version of this defense, where each of them could cover any perimeter player on a switch, and the help defense and runouts on shooters would be excellent. In essence, Simmons, Siakam, and OG would all be shouldering the center's duties on defense, i.e. rim protection, rebounding, and help defense, by committee. The other option would be to run a stretch five and then play Simmons in the guard spot. This is kind of what Philadelphia was doing, and while it didn't work very well in the Hawks series, I think that at least having this option available would be a smart thing for the Raptors to have in their toolbox should they trade for Simmons. Lastly, how would it work on offense? Simmons on offense is a very strange player. He has lead guard skills in a 6'10 body, but he can't shoot, and running him in the guard spot, where he would be driving to the basket with the ball, makes him prone to being fouled and sent to the line. Simmons is a monster in transition, where his combination of ball skills, size, and athleticism make him very difficult to stop. His passing is another well-known feature to his game, as he can see over defenses and make smart reads to shooters on the perimeter. Philadelphia also had him playing in the dunker spot a decent percentage of the time when he was playing off-ball. And he could use his ability to finish near the basket to catch lobs and handoffs. The key here is his free throw shooting. If Simmons can get back to being a 60%-ish free throw shooter, the offense should work okay. You'd run four other players who could shoot to stretch the floor, and then have him alternate between handling the ball on the half court and standing him in the dunker spot for easy dump-offs. If his free throw shooting is completely broken, you've got a big problem on your hands, because teams will adopt the Hawks hack-a-Simmons strategy and force you to either take him off the floor or be okay with him missing a ton of free throws. So in conclusion, it's a tough decision to make. The upside to a Lowry for Simmons deal is clearly very high. It's not like the Raptors would be forced to reinvent Simmons' entire game from the ground up like some teams would have to. Just hope for his free throw shooting to return to career norms. On the other hand, it could fail spectacularly, leaving the Raptors holding the bag on a max contract player who might simply be a flawed role player. If you were to ask me, I would say that the Raptors should go for it. You have to risk it for the biscuit, and I don't think that there's a deal for Lowry that has as much potential upside as a Simmons deal. I would be okay dealing a future first to make it happen, but when you start getting into multiple firsts, then I start reconsidering, as an already risky deal might take on too much potential downside. Anyway, that's today's episode. Any thoughts on who you hope falls to the Raptors at number 4? Should they make a deal with the pick? What are your thoughts on Simmons? Would the Raptors be foolhardy to trade for him, or would they be buying at an all-time low? Let me know in the comments, and also on Twitter @RapsReport. I always love reading comments from other Raptors fans. Please leave a like and subscribe, as that helps the channel grow. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.